The morning air felt thick with quiet arrogance. Inside the marble glass atrium of Langston Tech's global headquarters, sunlight scattered across polished floors, reflecting off towering digital billboards that boasted innovation slogans like, "The future is here," and "Progress without limits." But for Amara Pierce standing just inside those automatic glass doors, it all reeked of the same old tired lies. She adjusted the lapel of her midnight blue tailored suit, her fingers brushing the delicate silver pin shaped like an African Adinkra symbol for resilience. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step purposeful, unhurried. She carried no briefcase, no name badge hung from her neck, just a sleek phone in her hand and the confidence of a woman who had learned long ago that power isn't always worn. Sometimes it's carried in your silence. The receptionist barely looked up when Amara approached. A young white woman with aggressively sleek blonde hair and eyes glued to her computer screen, fingers tapping furiously on her keyboard, as if the fate of the world depended on it. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone edged with irritation, not curiosity. Amara stopped before the desk, her gaze steady, voice calm. "Yes, I'm here to see the executive board." The receptionist didn't even feign politeness. She laughed, sharp, dismissive. "Do you have an appointment?" Amara tilted her head. "I believe they're expecting me." "Name?" "Amara Pierce." At that, the receptionist finally made eye contact. Her expression flickered for a second, then settled into open condescension. "Look, Ms. Pierce, whatever, this floor is for executive meetings only. If you're dropping off a package or resume or—" She gave a pointed look at Amara's flawless appearance. "Here to see someone. You'll need to go around to HR on the lower level." There it was. The same look, the same tone, the barely concealed contempt reserved for black women in spaces they weren't expected to enter, let alone claim. Amara allowed a small, cold smile. "I'll be sure to let them know you said so." The receptionist gestured vaguely toward the revolving doors. "You can exit right where you came in." A man in a gray suit brushed past Amara, giving her a glance of annoyance before the receptionist's face transformed, all brightness and professionalism. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson," she chirped, standing to greet him. Dawson didn't notice the tension thickening the air. Amara checked the time on her phone. 3 minutes until the board meeting started. She took one last look at the receptionist, noting her nameplate, Kara Whitmore, then turned without a word and made her way to the executive elevator, swiping a small black card across the reader. The doors slid open. Several waiting executives inside, all white, all male, their chatter dying mid-sentence at the sight of her, stepped aside as if on instinct. No one spoke. No one asked who she was, because some people can recognize power before it announces itself. The elevator ascended, and Amara watched the floor numbers light up. On the top floor, the doors parted onto a sprawling conference space lined with floor-to-ceiling glass windows, offering a dizzying view of the city below. Inside, a handful of executives milled about. She recognized them all. Gerald Dawson, CFO, Preston Myers, head of operations, Elise Carter, legal counsel, all of them smirking, trading self-important banter, likely about this morning's rumored acquisition. None of them knew. Not yet. She paused outside the door, feeling not nerves but an ancient sense of inevitability. Today wasn't the start of something. It was the culmination. She pushed open the door. Heads turned, and before anyone could ask who she was or what she was doing there, Amara spoke, her voice smooth, clear, unflinching. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Amara Pierce." A beat of silence. The new CEO of Pierce Holdings, and as of midnight last night, the sole majority owner of Langston Tech. The room froze. The receptionist's words still clung to her like a ghost. "You can exit right where you came in." Amara smiled. "Oh, I'll be sure to, Kara," she murmured to herself. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. Section 2. The silence in the boardroom stretched so taut, it felt like the glass walls themselves might crack. Every face around the long mahogany table flickered from confusion to disbelief to something sharp and defensive. The names on those gold-plated door plaques, men who controlled entire divisions of one of the most powerful tech firms in America, suddenly meant nothing. Amara let the moment linger. Let them sit in it, steep in the uncomfortable weight of having grossly underestimated someone like her. It wasn't new. It had happened in Ivy League lecture halls where professors assumed she was there on a scholarship. In high-rise law offices where clients addressed her white male interns instead of her. At networking galas where people asked if she was with the catering staff. Today would be the last time. Gerald Dawson cleared his throat first, the kind of practiced sound used by men accustomed to steering rooms. I'm sorry, Ms. Pierce, did you say CEO? Amara walked to the head of the table and placed her phone down, screen glowing with the company's livestock ticker. That's correct. As of midnight last night, Pierce Holdings acquired a controlling 52% stake in Langston Tech. That's impossible, blurted Preston Myers, his florid face coloring. We would have known. There are procedures, reporting thresholds. There are, Amara agreed, her tone as crisp as autumn air. Unless those thresholds are intentionally kept beneath SEC reporting minimums by distributing acquisitions through a network of subsidiaries, shell entities, and silent investors. She watched realization dawn in Elise Carter's eyes. The legal counsel had always been sharp enough to realize she wasn't sharp enough to stop what had already been set in motion. And if you're wondering how that's possible, Amara continued, I'd suggest you speak to your former majority shareholder. He signed the final agreements at 11:47 p.m. and boarded a private flight to Geneva. A stunned chuckle escaped from one of the junior executives, quickly silenced by Preston's glare. Amara took her seat at the head of the table, a place none of them could deny her now. Which brings us to this meeting. New ownership, new leadership, new agenda. Elise, gathering her wits, tried to mount a defense. Ms. Pierce, with all due respect, you can't just walk in here and restructure a Fortune 500 company overnight. The board still has a say. Amara arched an eyebrow. And yet here I am. A wave of tension spread across the room as two assistants entered quietly and began distributing thick sealed folders to each executive. Inside, each man and woman found their own reflection in paper form. Salary bonuses, off-record emails, hiring statistics, vendor contracts, their entire professional lives, audited and dissected with clinical precision. This, Amara said, is the result of a 6-month forensic audit, conducted independently without your knowledge, while your former owner sought a buyer. It details, among other things, decades of discriminatory hiring practices, systemic wage disparities, retaliatory terminations, and fraudulent procurement contracts. Gerald's voice was a hoarse whisper. How? Because while you've been congratulating yourselves on incremental diversity initiatives, my team was hiring your overlooked interns, your passed-over managers, the black, brown, Asian, queer, and disabled talent you denied promotion after promotion. She gestured to the glass wall behind them where, beyond the reflective skyline, dozens of people now filled the adjacent executive lounge, people who looked like the world outside these walls. You buried potential. I raised it. Preston pushed back from the table, folder half open, his face an ugly shade of mottled red. You can't expect us to stay and listen to this. I don't, Amara said simply, which is why your resignations are already being prepared. Check your company emails. Phones vibrated simultaneously. I've replaced you with the very people you claimed weren't the right fit. And before you ask, yes, every department, every title, every office. Effective immediately. It was Elise who spoke next, quiet, almost desperate. Why do this? Amara leaned forward, meeting her gaze. Because you built an empire on exclusion. Because people like me were told to get lost, And because power isn't in taking seats at your table, it's in building a new one with room for everyone. The room was suffocating now. Amara stood, collecting her phone. This company belongs to its people now, its real people. Those you ignored, demeaned, and tried to erase. As she walked toward the exit, Amara paused. And if you see Kara Whitmore on your way down, she added dryly, tell her she's fired too. Then she was gone, the echo of her heels leaving a final, decisive punctuation mark on an era that had just ended. The building's executive floors, once a fortress of curated power and unchecked entitlement, felt different now. Word traveled fast in places like Langston Tech, where authority could shift with the opening of a single email, and every phone on that floor had just vibrated with the same message. Effective immediately, your position has been terminated at the discretion of the new executive board. The stunned faces of the departing executives mirrored each other as they exited the boardroom in clusters of disbelief. Some tried calling legal teams, others barked into phones in frantic attempts to reach the old majority shareholder, only to discover he'd abandoned his company, and, by extension, them. Meanwhile, Amara Pierce moved with unbothered grace through the halls, the stares that followed her no longer dismissive, but reverent or terrified. She stopped by the executive lounge, where the newly appointed directors and managers had begun gathering, the very people who had once passed unnoticed in these halls. The black woman from IT, everyone overlooked at meetings, the neurodivergent coding genius from QA who hadn't seen a pay raise in 5 years, the Latinx project manager who had designed the company's highest-performing product line and was never credited for it. Amara's eyes landed on Malik Carter, a wiry, brilliant systems architect in his late 20s. Malik had nearly quit 6 months earlier when his ideas were repeatedly stolen by senior management and presented as their own. Now he stood in a sharp gray suit, badge clipped to a lanyard that read Chief Technology Officer. Malik gave a tight, disbelieving laugh when Amara approached him. I still think I'm dreaming. You're not, Amara replied with a small smile. Welcome to your seat at the table. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city. From up here, skyscrapers glinted in the late morning sun. Amara stepped toward the central screen in the lounge and tapped her phone. The company's internal communication system sprang to life. On every floor, in every break room, on every laptop and tablet screen, the live stream began. Langston Tech's 14,000 employees were about to witness history. Amara's face appeared on the displays, poised and composed. She spoke plainly, without grandiose speeches or empty platitudes. My name is Amara Pierce, she began. Many of you don't know me, but I know many of you. I've been watching, not from above but alongside you. In offices, cafeterias, and warehouses across 5 continents, employees stopped what they were doing. I've seen how this company built its name while burying the people who made it possible. I've seen your ideas dismissed, your promotions denied, your potential wasted because someone else decided you didn't belong. Amara's voice never wavered. That ends today. A murmur rippled through every office space. Kara Whitmore, still seated at her reception desk, felt a sick twist in her stomach as her own phone lit up with an alert. Effective immediately. Your position has been terminated, Amara continued. We're not just replacing leadership. We're rewriting the rules. Effective today, Langston Tech will become the first Fortune 500 company with an equity-based governance model. Leadership seats will be filled not through closed-door nominations, but through public application and transparent review. She gestured to the new executive team behind her, a living contradiction of what corporate America had told them was impossible. You'll see new faces leading this company now. Faces that reflect the world we live in, not just the narrow corridor of privilege that's benefited too long at your expense. In break rooms, employees wept quietly. Some stood and cheered. To those of you who were told to stay silent, to settle for less, to know your place is here. In this company, in this story, and from now on, your voice shapes its future. Amara stepped back, letting the moment breathe. The camera lingered on her for a beat longer before the stream cut out, replaced by a message that simply read, "The future belongs to those who refuse to be invisible." As the screen faded, the building itself seemed to exhale. The old order, brittle and ugly, had cracked and fallen away in a matter of hours, and out of its ruins, something unthinkable had begun to bloom. The aftermath was a kind of beautiful chaos. Within minutes of Amara's address, social media erupted. Hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Pierce takeover, Langston uprising. This is what power looks like. News outlets scrambled for official statements, and every financial journalist on the East Coast flooded Langston Tech's press line. Markets responded the way markets always do, with uncertainty first, then fascination, then unyielding momentum. But inside those glass walls, it was the human faces that told the real story. On the 23rd floor, Marisol Rivera, a marketing manager who'd spent 9 years ignored, passed over and paid 30% less than her white male counterparts, clutched her phone, watching the replay of Amara's speech again and again, tears sliding down her face. On the coding floor, the all-black data science team Malik had built quietly under the radar, while management called them diversity hires, stood gathered around his desk, watching him field congratulatory calls as the new CTO. "I told you she was serious," Malik grinned, phone pressed to his ear. "This isn't just a title, we're rewriting everything." And they were. Amara's transition plan was already underway. On the executive dashboard, a new tab had appeared, Equity and Audit. It was a live-access database of every leadership decision, promotion, vendor contract, and salary band within the company, open to all employees. No more whispers in corner offices. No more nepotistic promotions hidden in HR's inbox. Kara Whitmore watched from the security desk downstairs, still too stunned to move as she refreshed her inbox one more time, hoping for some kind of reversal. But there it was, still glowing in cold, unforgiving text. Termination, immediate. Reason, violation of DEI standards, breach of employee conduct code. She reached for her phone to call someone, anyone, but hesitated. Because who could she call now? The old network was crumbling before her eyes, and those who once laughed with her in break rooms and forwarded her snide emails were already deleting the evidence. Upstairs, in what had been the old CEO's corner office, Amara stood alone for the first time since the takeover. The view was spectacular, a sweep of skyline interrupted by the glint of distant water. She thought of her grandmother then. A woman born in a place where black girls weren't allowed to look white men in the eye, who cleaned houses for families whose sons went on to run companies like Langston Tech. She thought of her mother, a public school teacher who always warned her daughter that being twice as good would never be enough in a world that judged you before you spoke. And now, here she stood, not because she begged for a seat at their table, but because she built her own. A knock at the door. Malik stepped in, still in his new suit but already rolling up his sleeves. "Sorry to bother," he said, grinning. "Thought you might want to see this." He handed her a tablet. On screen, the company's stock price had stabilized, then begun to climb. "We broke every rule in their book," Malik said, "and the market's still here." Amara smiled, the weight in her chest finally starting to lift. "Good. Let's burn their book." She tapped the screen, pulling up a file labeled Langston Initiative, Phase 2. "Tomorrow," she said, "we dismantle those vendor contracts, the ones funneled to board members' cousins and college roommates. We reroute those funds to community partnerships, black and brown tech incubators, paid internships for students without Ivy League pedigrees, mental health services for staff." Malik's grin widened. "That's what I'm talking about." "Oh, and Malik? Yeah? Hire that receptionist from Westbridge Labs, the one they ghosted because her hair was unprofessional. Put her on your team, triple whatever they offered." He nodded, a new glint in his eye. "Consider it done." As Malik left, Amara turned back to the skyline. The sun was beginning to lower now, turning the glass towers molten gold. They'd tried to tell her, get lost. Instead, she took everything and built something no one would ever again dare to tear down. By early evening, the building's atmosphere had shifted from shock to electric anticipation. People who had spent years watching their ideas dismissed in conference rooms, their contributions minimized in annual reports, and their names left off project credits now gathered in impromptu circles in the halls. Conversations were louder, bolder, smiles came easier. Down in the logistics department, Jamal Booker, a 42-year-old inventory manager who'd long resigned himself to being invisible, pulled up the company's new equity and audit portal on his workstation. There, in clear, irrefutable data, was the proof of what he and others had whispered about for years. He saw it: salary disparities by race and gender, nepotistic promotions, vendor deals funneled to friends of friends, a decade of inequity, quantified. He exhaled a shaky breath and whispered, "Damn, she really did it." In HR, a similar hush fell as files that had once been heavily restricted became accessible to every employee. Complaints that had been ignored, termination records with flimsy excuses, a pattern of silencing dissenters. At the top of the screen was a message from Amara: "Truth is power. The lie was thinking you'd never see it." Meanwhile, in the former CEO's private dining room, where only select executives had once been allowed to eat, Amara convened her new leadership council. No 12-foot polished table, no silver name plaques. Just a circle of chairs, eye to eye. Malik was there, of course, as was Marisol Rivera from marketing. Beside them sat Aisha Freeman, a trans woman who ran a record-breaking product rollout 2 years ago and had been relegated to mid-level project management ever since. Amara looked around the room at faces that corporate America was never meant to place at the top. "This isn't a moment," she told them. "It's a movement." She tapped the tablet in her lap, sending a new document to their devices. Project Second Door. Malik grinned. "You're serious about this?" "As a heart attack." The plan was simple in theory, radical in practice. Langston Tech would allocate 30% of its annual profits toward launching a national program for young Black and brown technologists, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Not scholarships, not internships to nowhere. Actual seed investments, executive mentorship, and guaranteed hiring pipelines. The name came from something Amara's grandmother used to say whenever they walked past those glossy skyscrapers as a child. "If they won't let you through the front door, baby, you build a second one." Aisha scrolled through the proposal, her voice tight. "You realize how many companies are gonna hate us for this?" "Good," Amara answered. "Let them." The room fell quiet, a charged kind of quiet, like the breath before a battle cry. A soft ping sounded. Malik checked his phone, his grin widening. You might want to see this." He turned the screen to Amara. Trending on social media was a photo someone had snapped of her as she left the boardroom hours earlier, head held high, flanked by her new executive team. The caption read, "The revolution will be executive-led." Comments poured in from around the world, messages of awe, gratitude, some disbelief, others seething outrage. It didn't matter. The old world was watching, and for the first time it wasn't them at the center. Amara smiled as she scrolled through the flood of names and faces, seeing young women with braids like hers, men with skin like hers, people with names the old world would have never considered for boardrooms. "It's starting," she said softly. And it was. This wasn't a chapter. This was a whole new book. She rose, smoothing her jacket, her voice sure and steady as ever. "Tomorrow we take the second door off its hinges." They followed her out, no fanfare needed, just power. Night fell over the city, the skyline a constellation of glass towers flickering against a velvet sky. Inside Langston Tech's headquarters, the old guard was gone, their legacy boxed and removed by corporate security before sundown. Their corner offices, once guarded like thrones, stood empty. the scent of polished wood and cold entitlement lingering like smoke. But on the 30th floor, a different kind of meeting was underway. The new leadership team gathered in what had once been the executive dining suite. The long mahogany table had been replaced by modular desks, pushed together to form a circle. No assigned seats, no hierarchy. Everyone had a voice. The hum of conversation was different here. No forced jargon or canned affirmations. Real talk, real laughter, real strategy. Amara stood at the head of the room, not because of position, but because every eye naturally sought her out. She held no clipboard, no prepared speech. Only the room's attention, earned not through title, but through blood, resolve, and the kind of defiant brilliance forged in places far from boardrooms. She clicked a button on her phone, and the projection screen behind her lit up. A grid of faces appeared. Langston Tech employees from satellite offices in Atlanta, Nairobi, São Paulo, and Oakland, connected by live stream. Family, she greeted them, and it wasn't corporate branding this time. A chorus of nods and greetings filled the room. This, Amara gestured around her, is what the next chapter looks like. She clicked again. New stats appeared, numbers the old board had buried, talent retention rates among marginalized employees, contract spending with Black and Brown-owned vendors, pay equity gaps, data they dismissed as distractions from profit. The numbers don't lie, Malik said, his voice steady now, shoulders squared. This company was bleeding talent and money by shutting people like us out. And now, added Marisol, pointing at the figures, we get to show them what happens when you stop wasting potential. Amara smiled. Not just show them. Make it undeniable. She unveiled Project Ascend, an initiative that would replace outdated performance reviews with community-driven promotion panels, dismantle legacy recruitment filters, and tie executive bonuses directly to diversity and equity benchmarks. No more performative panels, she promised. No more empty seats at the table. If you want a leadership bonus here, you build leaders around you who don't look, think, or live like you. Cheers erupted. Not performative applause, but the sharp, guttural affirmation of people who'd waited a lifetime for this kind of policy. Outside the conference suite, word spread fast. In the break rooms, in the stairwells, on Slack channels renamed in celebration. Second door opened. Security guards, maintenance staff, night shift employees who'd never been invited to executive meetings gathered around monitors and smartphones to watch the announcements. Even in the city below, news tickers ran with headlines once unthinkable. Black woman CEO flips power structure at Langston Tech. Industry watches in shock. At her desk in a downtown high-rise, Kara Whitmore read the headlines through bleary, disbelieving eyes. Her inbox remained empty. No job offers. No apologies. The old network that once protected her was silent now. Power had shifted, and she was on the wrong side of history. Meanwhile, Amara closed the meeting not with a speech, but a promise. I didn't come here for revenge, she said, her voice low, controlled. I came to end a cycle. Aisha, sitting nearby, murmured, and you did. No, Amara corrected softly, her gaze sweeping the room. We did. The live feed stayed open as staff from global offices chimed in, offering ideas, pledging solidarity. It wasn't a press release, it wasn't branding, it was real. And as Amara stood alone in the boardroom when the meeting ended, the city glowing beyond her reflection in the glass, she let herself feel it. Not victory, not even vindication. Something heavier, something older. The long, slow settling of justice finally landing in its rightful place. Tomorrow would be war. But tonight, history had been made. The following morning arrived like a reckoning. Across Langston Tech's sprawling international campuses, a new directive hit every inbox at 6 a.m. sharp, titled simply, Restructure Notice, Immediate Enactment. The memo was precise, surgical. A corporate purge executed with the elegance of a master strategist. The first to go were the nepotism contracts, a tight, incestuous web of vendor agreements and consulting deals that had funneled millions into the pockets of friends and relatives of the former executive board. Those cushy deals for overpriced catering companies, security firms with no licensing credentials, and strategic advisors with resumes built on privilege alone were terminated without ceremony. Vendors tried calling, tried threatening, tried invoking old favors, but no one answered. Amara's face was on every monitor at 8 a.m., addressing all staff via live stream. She spoke plainly without euphemism. Langston Tech will no longer be a haven for privilege masquerading as merit. Every contract, every hiring decision, every promotion will stand on transparency, equity, and measurable value. If you've built your career by proximity to power rather than personal contribution, you will not thrive here. Some employees watched with tears in their eyes. Others packed their things. In conference rooms, managers who had whispered about culture fit and subtle professionalism behind closed doors now found themselves stripped of authority, reassigned, or dismissed outright. Those who had spent years burying the talent they feared were now the ones standing outside the glass doors. By noon, word had reached competitors and industry insiders. Stock analysts, who just hours before predicted chaos, began reversing their assessments as early market indicators showed Langston Tech stabilizing, even thriving. A viral post from one former junior associate, recently promoted to Director of Product Strategy under the new regime, summed it up best. They said merit would suffer when equity took the lead. Turns out, what suffered was mediocrity. Amara's leadership council moved fast. Malik announced the immediate hiring of 30 new engineers from underrepresented communities, most of them already working within Langston Tech, but historically ignored for promotion. Aisha launched a review of HR's previous complaint records, reopening dozens of unresolved bias and harassment cases. In one of the most symbolic moves of the day, the executive lounge's velvet-roped VIP entrance was dismantled entirely. The doors left open, the furniture stripped of monogrammed nameplates. No reserved tables, no privileged meal service. It would become an open-floor co-working and wellness space for all employees. On the ground floor, employees gathered by the hundreds. The vibe was somewhere between protest and street festival. Laughter, applause, even music from a Bluetooth speaker one intern had smuggled into the lobby. A local reporter managed to slip inside and catch Amara as she exited the elevators. "Ms. Pierce, what would you call what's happening here?" Amara didn't hesitate. "A correction," she replied, her voice cool and unshaken. "This isn't a revolution. Revolutions imply something new is being created. We're just restoring what should have always been here. Fairness, brilliance, dignity." The clip spread like wildfire, picked up by every major news network before sunset. By evening, a different kind of exhaustion set in. Not defeat, but the weight of reshaping an empire 1 hour at a time. In the privacy of her office, Amara finally sat, her heels kicked off, her hair loosened. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Baby, your grandma would be so proud of you. You kicked down that front door." Amara smiled through burning eyes. Tapping a reply, she wrote, "Didn't just kick it, Mama. We took the hinges." She looked out over the city, one built on exclusion, on gatekeeping, and felt for the first time in her career that maybe she wasn't alone in this anymore. Maybe the second door wasn't a door at all. Maybe it was a wall coming down. Night settled in again over the city, but inside Langston Tech's walls, the hum of activity barely slowed. The executive suites no longer belonged to the few. Desks were being rearranged, office doors removed from hinges, literally. The unspoken rule that executives occupied an elevated floor away from the everyday workforce was abolished. From now on, leadership worked among the people they led, and in those offices, new conversations had begun. Malik led a meeting with the newly expanded tech team, a group of developers and analysts, most of whom had never set foot on the executive floor. The room vibrated with raw, unfiltered energy. Ideas poured out, unrestrained by the old fear of being talked over or stolen. I don't want to hear the word feasible tonight. Malik grinned. Bring me impossible. On the operations floor, Marisol gathered her restructured marketing division. No more lip service to diversity campaigns crafted by people who didn't understand the communities they exploited. Instead, they laid the groundwork for a platform called Narrative, an internal storytelling initiative amplifying employee stories across the company's public channels. Unscripted, unfiltered, and unapologetically real. Amara moved between these meetings, quietly observing the way rooms transformed when power dynamics dissolved. She recognized something deeper at work now. Not just administrative change, not even corporate rebellion. It was cultural reclamation. It was visible in the way people spoke, in how they carried themselves. As though decades of being told to shrink, to code switch, to mask ambition had finally cracked. The old guard's absence was barely noticeable. No one missed them. At 10:30 p.m., Amara found herself in the old executive boardroom, or what was left of it. Most of the chairs had been moved out. The heavy portrait of the company's late founder, a man notorious for never hiring a black executive in his 4-decade tenure, had been removed earlier that afternoon. In its place now hung a digital display, cycling through images of Langston Tech's workforce, from warehouse staff to R&D teams in Nairobi, São Paulo, and New Orleans. Each face framed by a simple caption, "We built this." Aisha entered carrying 2 mugs of strong black coffee. "You still here, boss?" Amara accepted the cup with a tired smile. "It's starting to feel like home." They sat, no pretense between them. "Got something you should see," Aisha said, sliding her phone across the table. It was a video clip from earlier that evening. A group of Langston Tech employees, Black, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous, gathered outside the building, holding signs that read, "Second Door Nation," and "Laid from the Margins." Singing, laughing, no protest, no violence. Just presence. The footage ended with a young woman on camera saying, "They thought we didn't notice. Now they'll never forget." Amara swallowed hard against the knot rising in her throat. "This is bigger than us now," Aisha murmured. "I know," Amara whispered. "That was the point." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Below them, the city buzzed on. Above them, a company transformed, not polished and repackaged, but cracked open and rebuilt. Amara sipped her coffee and finally let herself feel it. Not victory, not vindication. Freedom. And beneath it all, an unshakable certainty. This time, the second door would stay open. The third morning of the new Langston Tech dawned with a pulse all its own. Amara's phone had barely stopped vibrating since sunrise. Journalists, university chancellors, black business coalitions, and labor organizers across the country reached out, each conversation echoing the same underlying sentiment. This wasn't a corporate restructuring. This was a model. By 9 a.m., the city's largest business publication ran a banner headline, "Pierce Method: How a Black CEO Took Over a Fortune 500 Giant and Rewired Corporate Power." Inside the building, it was business as usual. If usual meant impromptu hallway brainstorms, cross-department lunch meetings, and a workforce moving with a kind of restless, collaborative electricity that had never existed under the old regime. In the new central collaboration space, once the executive lounge, Malik ran what he dubbed the impossible sessions, open invite meetings where no title mattered and no suggestion was too outrageous. A young black woman from custodial services named Lorraine pitched an idea about redesigning Langston Tech's wearable devices for people with mobility disabilities. Instead of patronizing pats on the back, the room fell into thoughtful, energized discussion. "Hire her," Malik told one of his managers afterward. Today. Elsewhere, Marisol finalized contracts with 3 minority-owned creative agencies, firms whose proposals had been ignored by the old marketing team for years. By noon, the company's social media feed had tripled its engagement, with customers voicing praise not just for the new leadership, but for the honesty radiating from every communication. Aisha chaired a transparency forum in the open atrium where employees asked pointed questions. How would past bias cases be handled? Would displaced executives face any accountability? How could they ensure this wasn't just performative justice? Aisha, without flinching, answered every question. "We're not perfect," she said plainly, "but we are accountable and we have receipts." The applause wasn't polite, it was real. Meanwhile, in a stark, airless meeting room of a boutique consulting firm downtown, former Langston Tech executives huddled in bitter silence, their once stable futures in shambles. Kara Whitmore sat near the window, still stunned. No job prospects, no callbacks. The old boys club she'd defended, mocked others for challenging, had vaporized overnight. The irony gnawed at her. The woman she told to get lost had built a door she'd never be allowed to walk through again. At midday, a courier arrived at the former CEO's estate with a package. Inside, a simple black envelope with an embossed seal. A note. "You built a house of mirrors. We built a home." Amara Pierce. Back at Langston Tech, Amara's office was alive with visitors, employees stopping by not to seek approval, but to offer ideas, concerns, or just gratitude. She refused to install a private door or keep an assistant as a gatekeeper. The final meeting of the day brought together every global office via live stream. Amara stood before the company for the third time in as many days. Her voice was tired but sharp. "This isn't a victory lap," she told them. "This is maintenance. Justice requires upkeep, and I expect every one of you to hold this new structure accountable." She let the weight of that settle. "Because a second door is no good if we forget who's still outside." A beat of silence. Then across every branch and division, applause thundered through the monitors. Langston Tech wasn't saved. It wasn't a utopia. But for the first time, it belonged to the people who made it possible. And out beyond those office windows, a new kind of industry standard was already rising. By week's end, the city could barely keep up with what Langston Tech had become. The financial press scrambled to rewrite narratives they'd long held sacred. Cable pundits, the ones who'd once mocked equity initiatives as corporate charity, now fumbled through breathless commentary on the company's surging market performance. The numbers told a story they couldn't spin. Productivity up 35%, customer satisfaction up 40%, retention of marginalized employees at historic highs. But inside the building, no one was chasing headlines. The work had shifted. On Friday afternoon, Amara called for a final leadership gathering in the newly christened Legacy Room. Once the old executive boardroom, now transformed into a circular council chamber with no elevated seats, no corner offices. Around the room sat Malik, Marisol, Aisha, Lorraine from Custodial Services, now officially Community Accessibility Liaison, engineers from Nairobi, product managers from Atlanta, night shift workers, coders, finance clerks. A room built on merit, not pedigree. Amara rose, no podium, no notes. Only a voice worn thin by a week of upheaval and a lifetime of battles. "You all know what this week meant," she began, "but what matters is what comes next." She gestured toward the digital board behind her. It displayed a simple chart. Future measures, Langston Tech Equity Framework. Underneath were the pillars they'd fought for. Open pay transparency, merit-weighted leadership promotions, inclusive vendor contracts, legacy fund investment in Black and brown startups, second door fellowship program for marginalized youth in STEM. Every person in that room had contributed to its drafting. "There'll be companies watching us now," Amara continued. "Some rooting for us to fail. Others quietly planning to replicate what works, minus the justice. A few chuckled knowingly, but what they'll never copy is our why. That belongs to us." She paused, her voice softening. "When you've spent years being told you don't belong, you either start to believe it or you burn down the room. We chose something harder. We rebuilt it." Aisha's voice rose from the circle. "And left the damn door open." Laughter and applause burst like a wave through the room. Amara took a breath, the final piece of her own burden lifting. "I don't care if they call this the Pierce method or the second door model," she said, her smile wide and unapologetic. "What matters is that people like us built it, and that no one's going to tear it down while we're here." The council adjourned with no gavel, no ceremony, just a circle of people rising on their own terms. As the sun began to set, employees gathered in the open atrium downstairs. No one announced it. No memo, no HR coordination. They just came. Night shift and day shift, interns and execs, bringing music, food, and long-suppressed joy. At the center, Malik and Lorraine danced like fools while Marisol recorded it for the company feed. Aisha debated strategy with two young interns who would someday wear titles bigger than their desks, and Amara, standing at the glass railing overlooking them all, felt a steady warmth in her chest. She thought of that first morning, of Kara Whitmore's smirk, of being told to get lost, and she realized something. She never got lost. She was always on her way. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. In the quiet after the final meeting, with the sun bleeding into dusk, Amara stood alone in her office. The city stretched wide and endless before her, a canvas streaked in orange and shadow. On her desk lay an old, worn photograph, a black woman in a faded house dress standing before a crumbling factory gate. Her grandmother. Beneath it, a handwritten line, "Don't beg them for their table, baby, build your own." Amara traced a finger over the words, her heart fuller than it had ever known. This was no ending. This was the blueprint. And somewhere out there, another black girl was watching, taking notes, planning her own impossible move. Another second door waiting to be built. Amara smiled, a quiet vow threading through her bones. We leave it open. Always.